Hello and welcome to my video, Malrose Projects, a lost cause. So, Malrose Projects is a YouTube channel. I apologise, I don't know the individual's name, but just to make it easier on me, I'm going to refer to them as Rose. Rose created a video series where they analyse the red pill community and they look into the academic backing or support of MGTOW's positions and the red pill community at large. Now, this premise is already fundamentally flawed because Rose is a feminist. So straight away, all their sources are going to be insanely and utterly biased, and academics and academia are irrelevant. What we live in is this thing called reality. So you need to demonstrate it in reality. And there's many things that MGTOW understands that we do not have hard numbers on. No one has hard numbers on. Like, for example, what is the number of false rapes reported? What's the number of false domestic violence? How many men go to prison through not paying child support and alimony? How many men commit suicide directly due to divorce and parental alienation? Now, originally I watched many of the videos by Rose with the purposes of just completely and utterly destroying Rose. However, I actually I found Rose quite entertaining, and I did notice some similarities between Rose and myself. For example, when I was younger, I was extremely academic and academically minded, and then when I got into the workplace, my bosses were ruthless pragmatists, which would slap all the optimism, idealism, and academia out of me and replace it with reality. So until Rose leaves college or university, that's simply not going to happen. They're going to keep living in their bubble. So I'm going to play some clips and then sort of analyze afterwards.
Growing up, I was raised by fairly socially conscious parents, and my mom was a self-proclaimed feminist. By 2012, I was a fairly feminism-friendly person, and by 2014, I consciously identified as a feminist. Since then, I've dipped back and forth between different branches of thought within feminism, but ultimately I've landed on believing in a few tenets of feminism.
Well, red flag number one. So let's hear how feminist Rose is.
1. Intersectionality. Intersectionality, of course, is the idea that rather than having social circumstances or systems be isolated singularities, they are instead complexly interwoven, intersecting structures that inform individual circumstances. To explain it in a simpler manner, things such as gender, race, class, sexual orientation, they don't exist independently of each other, but are instead linked in various ways. One of the best ways to demonstrate intersectionality is through the individual. As a white person, I will experience race differently than a black person. As a trans woman, I will experience gender differently than a man, but also differently than a cis woman. This thought can be applied to almost anything, but typically it's used in reference to systems of oppression in society. 2. Gender as a social system. I know this might disappoint some viewers, but I'm a social constructionist at heart, and I believe that gender is socially constructed from the ground up. The gendering of people as male or female, or consequently as men and women, in Western society is a social process through which we come to internalize a masculine or feminine identity. This process is one that I believe requires continuous reproduction in order to continuously be the case. We are not born men or women. Male and female are not the only possible gender identities, and the only reason why we've experienced such a binary is because the gender binary is imposed on people from day one, by which we socially disallow the construction of other gender identities. 3. The opposition and dismantling of patriarchy. Patriarchy is a structure in our society by which men come to be privileged over women and by extension come to hold a majority of the power in our society. It's worth noting that patriarchy isn't a legal structure, it's a cultural structure. Patriarchy is a mentality that we teach and that we learn and that we perpetuate through our culture. And this extends into our laws and into our media and into our homes. But it doesn't actually have a specific point of origin, it's more a continuously reproduced mindset. As such, we can undo that mindset, and removing patriarchal norms from our culture will by nature remove them from our society. This is a key component of giving women equality. It's also worth noting that patriarchy is not the only cultural structure of this kind, and that by opposing patriarchy, feminists aren't trying to construct masculinity or men as the inherent perpetrators of oppression. Oppression is more nuanced. Social structures intersect, and as a result, while patriarchy is the term used to describe the specifics of gender-based oppression, patriarchy is not a term that is sufficient to describe all oppression. Patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, cisnormativity, heteronormativity, these are structures that are in place in my society in the United States, and these things affect each other and they contribute to the subjugation of women, the subjugation of people of color, the subjugation of the working class, the poor and the homeless, the subjugation of trans people, gay people, bi people, and so on. 4. Egalitarian efforts. It's worth noting that although I will probably criticize groups of men a number of times throughout this video, critique is not the same thing as condemnation, and my beliefs as a feminist are not centered around helping women alone, but helping people regardless of gender. I do believe there are many issues that men face that are specific to men. I believe that men experience oppression on other bases, such as black men experiencing racism and in particular anti-black racism, or gay men experiencing homophobia, or poor men experiencing class issues. These issues are important, and I don't wish to be intellectually dishonest and ignore other axes along which men can experience hardship and oppression. It's also worth noting that I believe patriarchy as a cultural mindset is one that both privileges and harms men. And while I will often point out the privileges that men have because I think they're important to understanding gender-based social problems, I also will often point out the ways in which men are harmed by patriarchy. And so I will be fair and try to point out issues that harm men whenever I can. And yes, that does sometimes include white men and straight men and cis men.
So we found out that Rose is a trans woman, an intersectional feminist, believes in social gender constructivism, believes in feminist patriarchy theory, is extremely confused with egalitarian efforts. By this, Rose says that they're going to offer some criticisms and they will speak up for white straight men. So it talks about the hardship and the various issues and is completely absent from the ones directly and explicitly caused by feminism. To quickly add, the clips I've played were from the first video. Okay, and now I'm going to be playing some long clips from the conclusion, the final part of Rose's series.
After all of this, I think that it's actually pretty hard to make heads and tails of the red pill community. I mean, it's really easy for me to refute their points, to expose their ideas as flawed, to expose their motives as suspect, to mock them or condemn them or critique them. It's really easy to pull from a million different academic sources that debunk even the most basic statements amongst them. It'd also be very easy for me to say that there's a problem with feminism and not being good enough at reaching out to men, or not doing enough for men, to agree with men's rights activists to some degree, or to find some flaw on our end in regards to the conversation. I think the hardest thing for me coming through all of this is to sympathize or to humanize, and that's something I think is very important for progress, is learning how to see the humanity in any statement, in any person, in any belief, in any video or article. The problem is whether or not I or anyone can even afford to do that, given how dangerous the red pill mentality can be. When I started this video, my goal was simple. I wanted to discuss the red pill community as a sociological phenomenon, and an example of human behavior leading to social ailments, for both those outside the community and those within it. I wanted to take the information that I would find and clearly showcase why this needs to be addressed and why this needs to be discussed, analyzed, broken down, and refuted. I do think I've done a pretty good job at these goals, but I also feel a little hollow afterwards, and I'm not sure what it is. My history as a trans woman is not unlike the scenarios that a lot of these men find themselves in. That position of being seen as inferior masculine specimens, up to and including the harassment and bullying and physical violence that boys would inflict on me growing up. I grew miserable about women, but not out of hatred for women or out of a desire to sleep with women, but of a desire to be friends with women and to be one myself. I guess I internalized these circumstances as evidence of why being a man just wasn't something I was okay with. I didn't want to reclaim masculinity. I wanted to leave it, to abandon it. It is a bit hard for me to sympathize with men whose masculinity leads them into this mentality, because I rejected masculinity altogether and grew much happier because of it. I don't think asking men to reject masculinity is the correct answer at all. I just think that masculinity as they perceive it is so deeply wrong. As such, the only thing I can think of is to recreate masculinity, not in the image of Tyler Durden, but in an altogether more positive image, one that works with women, one that empathizes with women and with people of color and with LGBT people, one in which one's manhood and even one's masculine power is not threatened by vulnerability or low status or associating with those who are not like oneself. On a bigger, higher level, there has to be some sort of major change to how we conceive of masculinity. But the question I want to ask is, how can we, by which I mean people online who interact with people from this community and who try to make the internet a safer space for marginalized people, how can we make it easier to recreate masculinity within these circles so that when we interact with red pillars, it doesn't sound nearly as scary to abandon the conspiratorial logic that they've been pushed to adopt? In my opinion, we need to call out behaviors and beliefs that are unethical or that justify unethical behavior. And we need to recognize that anybody who believes in the core tenets of the Red Pill community has some degree of complicity in some really terrible treatment of marginalized people, particularly women.
Okay, that was a nice long clip. I'll quickly go through my bullet point notes. Their motives are suspect. The motives are very simple: to help other men by providing information. How the individual chooses to use that information is up to them. Rose also admits they found it hard to sympathize, empathize, and humanize with the red pillars, and this is important for progress and understanding. However, in the next breath, they add, can they afford to do this because of how dangerous the red pill mentality is, completely invalidating their previous notion? And that's why I wonder, is Rose just a lost cause? Is their bias too strong? Rose also admits that they rejected masculinity, and they agree the solution isn't for all men to reject masculinity. However, they then say that red pill masculinity is deeply wrong, and masculinity should be recreated to be more cooperative with women, people of colour, and the LGBT community. So, in short, they want to define masculinity for their explicit purposes, and then they talk about oppression. They also think that low status men should be included. However, they're a feminist. They know nothing about the selective enforcement of laws against low status men. For example, if a man asks a woman out or makes a sexual advance and the woman deems him low status, he's a sexual predator, he's a sexual harasser. He needs to be in prison. However, high status men can do the most crazy shit, and that's absolutely fine. Rose also makes one of the most highly dubious claims I've heard, which I do enjoy the claim. So Rose says they'll call out the community because some of the community is complicit in some really terrible treatment of marginalized people and especially women. And it's very funny because this is the thing. So they'll throw the people of colour in front and say, oh, you're treating a small part of the population badly, they'll throw them in front and you go, oh, okay, I concede, I'll be nicer to the marginalised. And then they piggyback, and then it's really all about women. I don't have an exact date of how long the red pill community has existed, but let's just pick a number. Let's say 10 years. In 10 years, there has been not a single news article of a red pillar treating women badly. All the instances where they claim someone was an MRA are completely fabricated. And the thing with certain terrible treatments is, if women were so strong and empowered, why can't they do it themselves? Why do we have to pre-capitulate already? And just to echo the point again, as you can see, it all boils down to power and control. So they're just, as TFM likes to say, they're just using their magic spells. They're just saying whatever words, but the bottom line is they just want power and control.
I'm not one for tolerating harmful behaviors, and I draw the line when someone is resigned to treating others like garbage. So I do think we need to minimize the capacity for people in that category to do harm. For those who are more along the way of being a red pillar who believes in harmful things but doesn't act out in harmful ways, I think it's important to find a way to distance those beliefs from those people by breaking down why those beliefs are poorly formed and making it easy to ditch those beliefs in favor of something better. For those who are not yet a part of the community but have those early signs of feeling inadequate in terms of masculinity and feeling awkward about women, I feel like the main goal there would be to foster introspection and self-improvement over pointing fingers.
Fuck me, Rose. You didn't do very thorough research, did you? You just said that they should do some self-improvement and introspection. One of the main things about the red pill community is we came to all these realizations through deep introspection by ourselves. And then we went online and we heard some other people saying a few things here and there. We're like, oh, I agree with that. And then we dig a little bit deeper and you're like, oh my god, like this has been happening for absolutely decades. And there's people online who have similar experiences and similar knowledge. And the red pill community is just pooling the knowledge and streamlining the process. Because, okay, I'm 30 odd years old. If I can get, I don't know, 1,000 different men of varying different ages to provide some of their lifetime experience, I'm going to hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that they went through in life. And the same is also true. I can give, or any MGTOW, any man can give practical, instantly applicable advice to your life. And with any information, we can test its validity every single day. I know, like for example, people love to joke about white knights. If I went and just slapped a woman around the face, loads of men would jump out and beat me up. Now, I know, for example, in India and in Egypt, the number of white knights is absolutely massive, and they'd probably nearly kill the guy for doing such a thing. Oh, and to quickly mention about treating people badly, I know of multiple women at this moment in time who are blackmailing the fathers of their children with separation, extra money, parental alienation. They're like, this is a scenario. They say, do this, otherwise you can't see your kid. Or I'm going to go to the family court and say that you abused the child, or you beat me up, or you've been violent or controlling or aggressive. And everyone knows how the courts are in the woman's favour. Even if they know the woman is a liar, a proved lying whore, it'll make no difference in court. They'll still side with the mother.
In fact, I think in general the best thing to do is to find a way to foster introspection and self-improvement. I just have no idea how to even begin to do that for people who have already surrounded themselves in such a community. If I were to answer what I would do, then I'd only refer you back to this very series, because this series is my answer to what I would do. Discuss the issues in the community and in the ideology, and sympathize but ultimately condemn the harmful tactics of the Red Pill community and show a vested interest in making it known that there is a really big problem here. I can't say what you or anyone else should do, but I can say that I would like to see more of a change to how we conceptualize the issue, thinking less so in terms of the community as a singular entity, and more so as a collection of individuals with shared traits in terms of beliefs, predispositions, and histories. On a most abstract level, I feel that the best option would be to make it easier and better to leave than to stay with such a terrible line of thinking that the Red Pill community pushes onto people. In terms of how to do that, I don't know, which is why I ask anyone watching to offer suggestions or to offer perspective. I would especially love to hear from former Red Pill members, as well as men who have found themselves in the vulnerable position that leads to joining a place like the Red Pill, but who may have not ended up there themselves, and what stopped them, what pulled them towards thinking better and more healthy thoughts.
Healthy thoughts, you go fuck yourself. I do like that you admit that you are too stupid to figure out an effective control mechanism for the MGTOW community. I'm glad that you did admit that. Also, through this admission, Rose admits to being a member of the thought police, because you don't police harmful thoughts. What you police is harmful actions. I'll give you a quick example. Theresa May is currently screwing up the Brexit deal for the UK. She's potentially screwing up the United Kingdom for all of eternity. So my harmful thoughts are probably she should get assassinated. However, these are thoughts. Not to put words in Rose's mouth, but according to Rose, I should probably be imprisoned already.
Of course, the Red Pill community has overlapping with harassers, and as such, I would also like to hear from those who have been targeted by the rhetoric of the Red Pill community. So if you have experience dealing with them firsthand, please feel free to offer your perspective as well.
Oh no, Rose, you let a little bit more of your bias slip there. I also mentioned that Rose is incredibly intellectually dishonest and intellectually weak. For example, Rose has a Discord which is for communicating. However, on explaining who I was and what I was doing there, instantly banned. And in the comment section, I wrote some nice long essays, and they were just like, too long, didn't read. And all the other counter the critics and counter points in all the video of all the comment section, they're all ignored. So there's no intellectual honesty, there's no intellectual discussion, there's no pursuit of the truth. And also I take issue with online abuse. Now, I remember on a computer game, I got very, very famous, and some people hate me to the point that they'd hope I died horribly of cancer. And they would remind me of this fact every single day for years. However, that is reality. Some people will hate you to the point they want your demise. They don't want you to have a future. Now, that is humanity. Not everyone can love you. Once you admit this, you can think, oh, it's possible some people hate me. Oh, it's also possible some people hate me to the absolute maximum extreme. And that's fine. That's how people will be, because that allows me to have the same freedom. I am free to hate to the absolute maximum if I so desire. But if I deny other people that right, then that's not right at all. And also, to quickly revisit a point which I didn't mention earlier, so their patriarchy theory is all about social norms, social narrative. However, enshrined and applicable in real life and real law is female rights over male rights. For example, men have no reproductive rights. This isn't an omission, this isn't an accident by feminists, this is deliberate. It's so obviously deliberate. And to quickly revisit the women who are blackmailing the fathers, this is implicit. This is observable reality. So the woman isn't making online harassment. No, she's threatening state power, ridiculous punishments, and possible imprisonment. As many will say, one unverified phone call by a woman could land you in prison for a life sentence. And as feminists claim that there's not enough rape prosecutions, they're like, nah, we'll make an example out of a few innocent men. I'm sure that's what justice is all about.
I come at this series from the perspective of a sociology student who has spent a lot of time in internet circles and wants to bring the two together, to analyze the internet from a sociological and feminist perspective, and to tie what I find into what I've seen, heard, and read from academia and from feminist voices. Granted, I don't speak with authority, just with insight, and I hope my insight might be in some way valuable, but I'm just one person, and I hope that this series is more of a jumping off point rather than a stopping point for discussing how best to approach the issue of working against masculine entitlement and the feelings of inferiority that mix so toxically with said entitlement. If anyone has any ideas for further steps to take for continuing this conversation as it applies to the Red Pill community or any other community, feel free to contact me. And if you have any requests for other communities or ideologies or phenomena that you would like to see me take a look at, again, feel free to contact me. My goal isn't to portray myself as an authoritative sociological perspective, but as an advocate for feminism and sociological perspectives and analysis. As such, I dedicate my Patreon to saving up money for school and channel expenses, as I hope to someday become a sociologist myself. And I'm flat broke when it comes to paying for college, so if you like the work I've done here and would like to support the channel, feel free to donate, and as I often say, generosity is appreciated but not necessary. My videos will always be available to people for free, and I don't make them for gain, but to try to help people in any way I can. Thanks for watching.
Firstly, I apologise if you hear any background noise. So, as we heard from that clip, Rose invites discussion, thoughts and opinions. And as I already demonstrated, and you can read all her comment sections, that is just complete and utter nonsense. So, the main takeaway points in conclusion. So, firstly, I recommend you do watch the series, because it's absolutely hilarious, and all the gotcha moments and evidence that are presented is purely academic. And the thing is, when there's something that Rose cannot dismiss or debunk, Rose attempts to ridicule and at the same time shoots themselves in the foot. Like, for example, the 80-20 rule. The thing is, women won't know about the 80-20 rule necessarily because they don't try to date other women. Like, how comes all the major dating sites have confirmed the 80-20 rule and they've actually made it look like it's 90-10? So women are only chasing the top 10% of guys. And ask a woman, what are you looking for? They're looking for Superman. So, I suppose my two main broad points is I feel exceptional pity for Rose. Because Rose has just... Red Pill Wisdom made a great video, Children of Feminism. And Rose is a stellar case, and it's just exceptionally sad that Rose's mother's a feminist, and Rose has been completely and utterly destroyed by feminism to the point that they're destroying their own future. They're continually perpetuating their own destruction and the demise of others, but they think they're on the correct side. They think that they're morally good. They think that their behaviour is morally ethical, which is just absolutely amazing how bad the indoctrination is. To the point that they're denying their own biological identity. Now, whilst I agree to some extent with gender as a social construction, all we need to do is take Rose back. Let's say Rose was born 200 years ago. Would they be talking about social patriarchy theory and gender as a social construction. And is it because thoughts have evolved? It's the opposite. It's because people have come up with new ways of controlling thoughts and opinions, like cis normativity. It's like, okay, so you're going to start demonizing and ridiculing the group that keeps the human race alive, and it's literally the most natural, the most natural arrangement of animals that could possibly exist, and this is somehow bad. So I don't know how mentally deficient you need to be to hold these sort of positions. And overall, I did quite like Rose. As I said, in some ways, Rose does have some characteristics I share. Like, for example, I'm sure they're pretty introverted and they love a bit of good introspection. However, maybe because they haven't spent any time with the ruthless pragmatist, they don't understand what the nature of reality is. And they haven't reached out to people in real life. Like, for example, ask a man, what was it like going through divorce? Oh, it was really fucking terrible and you never want to do it again. And you recommend to every single man never get married under any circumstances. What? This is the same conversation I've had with hundreds of men. Oh, I wonder if there's a pattern. I wonder if this pattern extends to the wider and larger society. The thing with all information is you can test it in reality. Does it hold true? And the trouble with almost every single thing, there's sort of grains of truth in what they're saying, but it just doesn't hold up wholeheartedly. It doesn't hold up to the rigors of reality. Like, for example, in one of Rose's videos, they point at men are the majority of leaders in the world. They point to men as the leaders of companies. And it's like, okay, who created the companies? Let's take, okay, I can't remember the Amazon guy's name. The Amazon guy, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs. Okay, so who put them in power? What's that? They earned it themselves. And again, the trouble is, it's just so silly looking at the guys on the top when, like, 99.9% of all men are at the bottom. And you're pointing at the guys at the top saying, we need to take these guys out. Men are in power. Men are unfair. It's like, okay, what about the whole populations who are doing absolutely everything? What about them? I'm not sure anyone made it to the end, but thank you for listening, watching, and goodbye.